One network drama killed off its most popular character in a season finale, and fans were furious enough that ratings actually dropped. The writers responded with something almost nobody had tried before. They brought him back and told the audience the entire previous season, 31 episodes that people had already watched, simply never happened. It was all just a dream. That's not even the strangest one on this list. Welcome back to Throwback Network, where we dig into the moments that actually happened on the shows you grew up with. Today we're counting down 10 times a show killed off a character to shock its audience, and it backfired. We've got a primetime soap that killed off half its cast at a royal wedding, then quietly unkilled almost all of them by fall. We've got a sci-fi legend that killed a fan favorite so fast, the crew spent years afterward trying to explain their way out of it. There's also a finale so bleak that its own star still won't talk about it. Every single story on this list starts the same way, with a writer's room looking for a headline, a ratings boost, a moment people would talk about at work the next morning. In every single case, though, the moment people actually talked about the next morning wasn't excitement. It was confusion, or anger, or just a quiet sense that the show didn't trust its own story anymore. These are the deaths that were supposed to hook an audience and instead push them away. Let's start at number 10. Number 10. Mitch Leery, Dawson's Creek. Mitch Leery had been part of Dawson's Creek since the pilot episode. He wasn't flashy. He ran a restaurant, gave decent advice, and felt like the one steady adult in a show full of teenagers making questionable decisions. By season 5, the writers decided he had to go. The way they wrote him out is one of the most talked about deaths in the show's run, for the wrong reasons. Mitch is driving, eating an ice cream cone, drops it in his lap, and crashes the car. And that's the entire death of a character who'd been on screen for 5 years. The real story behind it was contract negotiations. Actor John Wesley Shipp wanted either a bigger role or a way out, and rather than write him a proper send-off, the show chose sudden tragedy. Series writer Tom Capinos later admitted the whole thing was handled badly, calling it, in his own words, an utter disaster. When the person who wrote the death agrees it didn't work, that's not really a twist. That's just a mistake the show never fully recovered the tone from. Dawson's Creek was a series that had always leaned on its characters' words to carry big moments. Entire episodes built on conversations, not car crashes. Ending one of its most trusted adult voices with a dropped ice cream cone felt like the show forgetting what it was good at, right when it needed that skill the most. Number 9. Robert Rocket Romano. ER. Dr. Robert Romano was the character on ER that audiences loved to hate. Arrogant, cruel to his staff, endlessly punished by the universe in increasingly absurd ways. A season before his death, a helicopter's rotor blade had already sliced off his arm on the helipad. You'd think that would be the last time the writers went anywhere near a helicopter for this guy. It was not. In Season 10's episode Freefall, Romano steps outside to yell at a colleague, and an entire helicopter falls out of the sky and crushes him. Actor Paul McCrane said producers wanted the death to be, in his words, a shocking surprise, timed for a sweeps period when networks push for big, attention-grabbing moments. What it actually became was one of the most mocked deaths in the show's 14-year run. Critics pointed out that using the exact same machine that had already maimed him once made the whole thing feel less like tragedy and more like the show was in on its own joke, daring the audience to laugh instead of gasp. Romano had survived gunshot wounds, an amputation, and years of the hospital's worst days. Dying under a falling helicopter, after already losing an arm to one, didn't read as a fitting end for a character the show had spent a decade building into one of its most complicated figures. It read like the writers had simply run out of other ideas and reached for the biggest object they could find. Number 8. Dan Connor, Roseanne. This one is less a death and more a season-long con on the audience, and it's a strange one. Dan Connor suffers a heart attack at the end of Roseanne's 8th season. He survives it, or so viewers are told, and the entire 9th and final season shows him alive, working through problems, even supposedly having an affair, right up until the finale reveals the twist. Dan actually died of that heart attack. Everything the audience watched for an entire season, the affair storyline included, Was Roseanne's grief working itself out on the page, since in the show's own conceit, she was a writer processing loss? Season 9 is widely considered the weakest stretch the show ever produced, and the twist didn't land the way the writers hoped. It didn't just fail to satisfy people, it retroactively made an entire season feel pointless to have watched. It took 20 years, but Roseanne eventually addressed it directly. When the 2018 revival brought the family back, Dan is simply alive again, no elaborate explanation. He just wakes up next to Roseanne like nothing happened. A quiet acknowledgement that the show knew it owed the audience a redo. Think about what that actually means. A network sitcom spent 20 years living with the reputation of that finale before finally deciding the cleanest fix was to pretend it never wrote it. That's not a twist people still talk about fondly. That's a twist the show itself eventually tried to bury. 7. Scott Scanlon, Beverly Hills, 90210. Scott Scanlon wasn't a lead. He was David Silver's friend, a supporting character who mostly stayed in the background of a very glossy, very stylish teen soap about rich kids in Beverly Hills. At his own 16th birthday party, Scott is playing with his father's gun, accidentally shoots himself, and dies right in front of his best friend David, who witnesses the entire thing. The problem wasn't that the writers tried something dark. It's that nothing about the show, before or after, had prepared anyone for it. One episode, you're watching glamorous California teenagers deal with dating drama, and the next, a supporting character is dead from a completely preventable accident that the show never really engages with again at any length. Fans weren't shocked in the way that makes you lean forward. They were shocked in the way that makes you wonder if you're still watching the same series. Beverly Hills, 90210 built its whole identity on gloss, on the idea that even its heaviest storylines came wrapped in something glamorous. A sudden, senseless gun accident didn't fit that world, and the show seemed to know it, since the topic was barely revisited with any real weight afterward. Number 6. Rosalind Shays, L.A. Law. Rosalind Shays, played by Diana Muldaur, was one of the most memorable characters L.A. Law ever produced. Cold, brilliant, and genuinely unlikable in a way that made her fascinating to watch. In a 1991 episode, she says a routine goodbye to a colleague at the office, turns around, and steps backward into an open elevator shaft. She falls to her death, mid-conversation, mid-episode, with absolutely no warning. One moment she's discussing the day's business, like any other scene on any other lawyer show. The next, the doors open on empty space, and she's simply gone. At the time, this was almost unheard of. Major character deaths on television nearly always happened in season finales or premieres, big moments the audience could brace for. Killing someone off in the middle of an ordinary episode broke an unspoken rule, and it worked as pure shock. Diana Muldaur herself has said she didn't know it was coming until she read the script. That shock came with a price. The scene is still one of the most referenced moments in the show's history, and it's remembered today less as a triumph and more as the moment many longtime viewers point to as when L.A. Law started to lose what made it work. Shays had been introduced as a genuinely great addition to the cast, someone the writers could build entire cases and courtroom battles around. Dropping her down an elevator shaft made for one unforgettable minute of television and cost the show a character it clearly still had story left to tell with. Number 5. Tasha Yar, Star Trek, The Next Generation. Security Chief Tasha Yar was one of the breakout characters of Star Trek The Next Generation's first season. Actress Denise Crosby felt her character wasn't being used well and asked to leave the show. That part is understandable. What the writers did with the exit is where things went wrong. In the episode Skin of Evil, the away team encounters a strange, tar-like alien entity named Armus. Yar loses patience with it, gets too close, and is killed almost instantly, draining away without much of a fight and without much dignity for a character who'd spent a season as the ship's chief of security. It's widely regarded as one of the weakest episodes the series ever produced, and the death itself is frequently cited by longtime fans as the show's biggest early misstep. The backlash lingered so long that the writers kept finding excuses to bring Yar back. An alternate timeline here, a time travel episode there, even a storyline built around a daughter she has in a different reality entirely. They killed her off in a single scene and then spent years afterward trying to walk it back, which tells you almost everything about how the original decision landed. Number 4. Maddy Ferguson, Twin Peaks. Twin Peaks built its entire first season around the mystery of who killed Laura Palmer, becoming one of the most acclaimed shows on television in the process. Midway through season 2, though, the show killed someone else who looked almost exactly like her. Maddy Ferguson, Laura's cousin and look-alike, had become a favorite of viewers in her own right, giving the show a reason to keep exploring Laura's world even after the initial mystery had run its course. She's murdered by a possessed Leland Palmer in a scene deliberately staged to echo Laura's original death, drawn out, graphic, and disturbing in a way that critics and scholars have pointed to for years as excessive even by the show's own standards. The timing made it worse. Ratings were already sliding as the show's mysteries grew more tangled and its network time slot kept shifting. Twin Peaks was canceled at the end of that same season. A show that had built its identity on one girl's death didn't need to restage a nearly identical one to prove it still had teeth. Instead, it looked like the show repeating itself right as audiences were already starting to walk away, trading the eerie, patient dread that made the first season a phenomenon for a moment that felt like it was chasing its own earlier success. If you've made it this far, you already know the drill. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and drop a comment telling us which of these you think was the biggest miscalculation. We read every single one. Number 3. Xena. Xena, Warrior Princess. For 6 seasons, Xena Warrior Princess had been one of television's most beloved action heroines, syndicated worldwide, adored by a devoted fan base. The 2-part series finale, titled A Friend in Need, sends Xena on one final mission to free 40,000 trapped souls. She's beheaded by a samurai. Her spirit then goes on to defeat the villain in the underworld anyway, freeing the souls, but the show makes a deliberate choice to keep her dead, permanently, with no resurrection, no loophole, and no reset, even though the entire series had spent 6 years establishing exactly those kinds of second chances as part of its DNA. Fans were devastated in a way that never really faded. Star Lucy Lawless has said publicly that she has always regretted how it ended, and both she and co-star Renee O'Connor have said in interviews that they'd rather pretend the finale doesn't exist. When the 2 people who played the leads want to forget the ending, that tells you the shocking, permanent sacrifice didn't land as the bold, artistic statement the writers were going for. It landed as a betrayal of 6 years of investment, 6 years of a hero who always found a way through, ending on a note that offered the audience nothing back for the loss. Number 2. The Moldavian Massacre, Dynasty. Dynasty closed its 5th season with the wedding of the century. Amanda Carrington marries Prince Michael in the fictional kingdom of Moldavia, in an episode promoted for months as the event of the year. Right after the vows, armed rebels stormed the chapel and opened fire on the entire wedding party. Nearly every major character on the show is shown getting shot, and the screen cuts to black. America spent the entire summer of 1985 debating who had survived. When the 6th season premiered that fall, almost everyone turned out to be completely fine. Only a couple of minor characters actually died. The show had spent a whole summer letting its audience believe it had wiped out its own cast, generating months of headlines and water cooler conversation, and then delivered almost nothing to back it up. Cast member Pamela Bellwood later said plainly that the massacre was the moment Dynasty began to change course, and not for the better. The stunt got attention. It didn't earn trust, and shows built on soap opera stakes need their audience to believe the stakes are real. Once viewers realized the show was willing to fake them out on that scale, every future cliffhanger came with an asterisk. Dynasty had traded away its credibility for one enormous summer of speculation. And credibility, once a soap opera loses it, is much harder to earn back than ratings. Number 1. Bobby Ewing's dream season, Dallas. Bobby Ewing was, alongside his brother J.R., the emotional center of Dallas. When actor Patrick Duffy decided he wanted to leave the show, the writers didn't ease him out. They killed him, struck by a car, in the season 8 finale. It did not go the way anyone hoped. Ratings, which had been dominant for years, actually dropped without him in season 9, and the show responded with a decision almost unheard of in television history. They brought Duffy back, And to explain his return, they revealed that the entire 9th season, 31 full episodes that audiences had already watched, had never happened. That it was all a dream in Pam Ewing's head. Bobby simply reappears in the shower one ordinary morning like nothing ever occurred. Reports from the set describe cast members as furious that a full season of their work had effectively been erased with a single scene. Storylines, guest stars, entire subplots, all of it wiped away in the space of one shower scene. Reception was split. Some viewers were just glad to have Bobby back. Others felt cheated, like the show had proven its own deaths meant nothing, that no loss on Dallas could ever really be trusted to stick. Either way, the moment became shorthand across all of television for the ultimate cop-out ending. The go-to example whenever a show writes itself into a corner and decides the easiest way out is to pretend the corner never existed. Decades later, writers' rooms still invoke the shower scene as a warning, shorthand for exactly the kind of decision you don't want to be remembered for making. They killed their most important character for shock value, watched the show suffer for it, and then admitted, as loudly as television possibly can, that it never should have happened in the first place. Of everything on this list, it remains the clearest example of a shocking death costing a show more than it ever gained. Conclusion. That's 10 times. A shocking death didn't just fail to hook an audience, it actively pushed people away. From dream seasons to helicopter crashes to a wedding massacre that wasn't, these are the moments that remind you a twist only works if the audience still trusts you afterward. Kill a character to make people feel something, and it can define a show for the right reasons. Kill a character just to make people talk without earning it, and the talk tends to turn on the show itself. Which one of these do you think never should have happened? Let us know in the comments, and if you want more stories like this, from the shows that fell apart behind the scenes to the casting decisions that almost changed everything, there's plenty more where this came from. Thanks for watching. This is the Throwback Network, and I'll see you in the next one.